Welcome everyone to this week's Wednesday webinar. Today we are going to be talking about creating email workflows within the CRM. So an email workflow is often used to send notifications to users about required action for records, or you can also send correspondence outside your organization. Some common things that I see is internally, maybe a new customer service case or a new opportunity is created and you send notification to the particular salesperson or customer service rep that you want to handle the case. You can also take it as a way of management, such as maybe an opportunity is left open and it passes the estimated close date and you want to have the email sent to the manager letting them know, hey, this passed, or maybe cases that aren't followed up on with a certain period of time or aren't resolved within a certain period of time. So you can use that as a way of notification and management. You also can, if you have business stages, I've seen people use it to notify the next person in the line. So maybe you have a new opportunity and then it needs to go to a design team. So when it enters that stage, it would email that designer and so on and so forth down to all the business stages. Another thing for outside of an organization, I have seen email workflows to send automatic responses to a customer on like a customer service case or notification of like expiring contracts that might be sent to like the salesperson and the customer, like, hey, this is expiring in 30 days or whatever. So you can set it up depending on your particular business needs. I do know email workflows are the #1 workflow that I usually get requests from customers for, so it is something that is used quite frequently. I put a few tips on this first page. To be able to send an email, the recipients must exist within your system, whether that's an internal user, an account or contact, or even leads can have email addresses associated with them as well. And we'll talk a little bit more about this from field, but if you're using the from field within your email template with the workflow and you set it to a dynamic value where maybe it would be like the owner of the record or something like that, there are some updates that are needed to security roles and some individual optional settings, and we'll talk about that here in a little bit. Another big thing with creating email workflows and any workflow really is to make sure that you have your scope set correctly. CRM does default to having your workflow set to a user-only scope, and that needs to be changed if you want it to work across the whole organization. And the #1 complaint that I see actually when creating email workflows is having too many triggers and duplicate emails being sent. So we'll look at all of this when we get into actually creating a workflow, but just a few tips for you to keep in mind when you're looking at creating email workflows. And then this is just a brief synopsis of some of the things that you can format within your email. You can set from to carbon copy, blind carbon copy. You can have both dynamic and static values. And you can do all sorts of formatting with font, color, size, bullet points. The cool thing that a lot of people don't know when starting email workflows is that you can have hyperlinks in your email. You can link directly to the record itself in the CRM. So someone receiving an email can click on that link and go directly to the record within CRM, or you can add in links to other websites. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into actually creating an email workflow here. Now, when you're within your CRM, there's a couple places that you can go to create an email workflow. Underneath the settings tab, if you have a slightly newer version of CRM, you will see a processes section roughly in this area here. If you do not see a processes section, you go to customizations, customize the system, and then you're looking for processes here in this list. And when you open that tab up, whether it's within the window, the processes tab directly, or here in this customize your system, it will show you all your current processes that you have, and you would select new to create a new one. I do already have a window popped up with the one that we're going to create today here. And I just named this one test email workflow. I find it best when you are creating workflows to come up with some sort of naming system when you first start, or at some point rename kind of everything so it makes sense to your organization. But you can do with it whatever you want that way. So we're going to talk about this availability to run. So workflows automatically run in the background. And what that means is that when that workflow is triggered, it is going to wait until the system has the resources available to run that job. A lot of times it can take a minute or two. It's not usually a huge delay unless you have thousands of system jobs running. And that's usually the best way not to tie up resources and to keep the performance of your system running. It's what I recommend when you're doing an email workflow. If you were to convert to a real-time workflow, which we see that option here up on the top toolbar, what that means is that when that workflow is triggered, it will take resources, even if it has to divert them from other jobs running in the background, and it will take that action immediately. This is helpful if you're doing something that maybe requires like an error message or something to pop up to your user right away. That's when you might want to use a real-time workflow, but otherwise, I would always recommend to keep them in the background. It just keeps the performance of your CRM at its best possible state. Right now, I do have as an on-demand process selected. What it means when you select on-demand process is that you can run this workflow manually from the toolbar when you're within a record type. So with this one, anytime we're within an account, we could select to run a workflow and we could manually trigger the workflow we're going to create. This isn't needed for a lot of workflows that I see people create. I use it myself when I'm demoing a workflow, or maybe when I'm testing a new workflow. If I just want to see, I can trigger it manually instead of waiting for something to happen to a record, so I can see what that email is going to look like. So for today's purpose, so you guys can see what the email will come through as, we are going to leave that checked. If you don't want people to be able to trigger it manually, definitely don't have it as an on-demand process. You can see over here the entity we initially selected is account, and that's what we're going to work on here. And the scope, this is where I had mentioned you want to make sure that you set the scope of your workflow appropriately. So you can see it will default to user here, and the other options are business unit, parent-child business units, and organization. And you will select one of these based on how your organization is set up in CRM. Most people have just one organization and all their data is housed within that, and then they have their individual users. However, some companies might have multiple business units. So maybe your divisions are actually broken into separate business units and you keep separate data on both of them. You want accounts that are only within one business unit and the other business unit can't see them. That's when people create business units. I don't see it a lot, but I have seen it. Most of the workflows that I've seen people create, you do want to switch this to organization because that means it will apply to anyone in the organization. If you leave it on user, it will only run on records that are your records, where it's taking action on your records or sending an email to you. So that's just important to note. Here where we see start when, these are the different triggers that you can select from. When do you want an email to be sent? Is this something where when it's created, so a new case or a new opportunity is created, notify the person it's assigned to or notify a particular manager? Status changes, that's going to have to do with if an opportunity goes from like closed to one, or it's closed one instead of open, or it's lost, or it can be resolved or open as far as cases. It's just whenever that overall status of a record changes. Record is assigned. This is used a lot within customer service type fields. When a record is assigned, you want to notify the new customer service representative or something like that. So that's when that owner of a record changes, it would trigger this workflow. When you look at records fields change and you hit select, this is where you can choose from which fields within that record need to change to trigger that. So common one that I mentioned before was talking about different business process stages. So you could have, let's see here. We've got, this is all the fields for the entire record are going to be in here. And because I'm working on an account, it's not going to have it because we don't have a business process, but a lot of times it would be your pipeline phase that is going through different business stages within an opportunity. But this is any of your fields within the record you're working on. I will caution you not to select too many, because every time one of those fields change, even if it's a slight change, it will trigger an email. If that's what you want, definitely go ahead. You want to be notified if the name changes or the address changes or all of the above, that's great. But I just have seen people select multiple fields and then be like, I'm getting too many emails from CRM. So really think about what it is when you want to be notified. And then there is also if record is deleted. So if this account is deleted, which I never recommend anybody does, I always recommend deactivate or close or inactive, everything. That way, do not delete, but you can be notified if a record's deleted, so then you would know if someone took that action. So for this case, we're going to say we just want to know when a new account is created. So I'm just going to select record is created. Now, I have also been writing some of our blog series on workflows recently, so you can also check those out if you want to look at all these other steps that you can take with a workflow. We're going to be focusing in on just send email, but you can combine sending an email workflow with multiple other steps. You can have a check condition, maybe it needs to go to a different manager depending on the division this record falls within. So you can have it check a condition and be like, if the division is this, you'll send an email here, and then you can have a conditional branch where if the division is this, then send an email here. You can create new records and update records and send an email. Most of the time when I've seen workflows created, there are multiple steps, but we're just focusing in specifically on the sending an email portion today. So when you select send email and it says create new message, you can also use a template if you've created email templates. Majority of them is create a new message. And then we're going to set the properties here. So this is going to pop up another window for us. And this is where you will create the email that you want CRM to send. So let's talk about this from field. When you set an email workflow, the CRM is going to default to the from field being from the creator of that workflow. So I'm creating this workflow, so the from field is going to show Jerica Coleman if I don't fill it in with anything else. And that's fine. I recommend you don't fill it in with anything else. If you want the from field to default to the person that owns the record, or maybe the person that created the record, or whatever it may be, you can set dynamic values within the from field. However, this can cause some security issues. Your workflow can error out saying you do not have sufficient privileges to send on behalf of another user. So there are some extra security steps where you have to, within that person's security role, you have to enable them to send emails on behalf of another user. And then the people that could be those other users also have to set something within their individual options that say, allow people to send emails from me. So it's just a few extra security steps, and if any of you run into that, you definitely can reach out to us and we can walk you through that. It's not something we're going to look at today just because it does take a little bit more diving into user records. So we're going to leave the from field blank. Within these, to carbon copy, you can either select a distribution list where you are selecting people that you always want this email to go to, or you can set it to a dynamic value where you want it to choose from a field of that record. So in this case, in the to field, we're going to go ahead and just select someone from our list. So I'm going to click this magnifying glass. It automatically defaults to account. I'm just looking for a user, and I want it to send to me. So I'm going to go ahead and select my name from the list, select, and add. So now you can see it has Jerica Coleman as the to. And to show you the difference how a dynamic value looks, in the carbon copy here, we are going to put the account owner. We want them to also get the email. So over here on the form assistant, this is where the dynamic values listed. So we're going to look for the account, and this is going to have your record you're working on plus related entities. But we're going to pull from the account, and we're going to say we want the owner of the account. We're going to click add, select it, and hit OK. And now you can see it's also saying that the carbon copy is going to go to the owner of the account. And we can go ahead and start setting our subject. So let's say we want to put a new account has been created. You can do typing. You also can include these dynamic values. So maybe we want to just include the account name. When you're looking at the name, there is a field that says account name. There would be opportunity name, things like that. You also can select just account, because that's going to pull that title from the account or from the opportunity or whatever record you're working with. So we're going to add that in. And now we're going to look at the body of the email. So we're just going to say this is our test email, and let's pull the name, phone. I like to always do all my typing first and then add the dynamic values that I want in there. So I'm going to put the account name in here again. Oops, I accidentally added it twice up here. Okay, so we're going to add in the account name, and I'm going to put here, and I'm going to take out the account name, and I'm going to look for, I want to add in the main phone number. It's important to note when you're looking at these fields, these are the display names that you have selected when creating the fields, so sometimes it can be a little hard to find, but just know that going into it. And then we're going to go ahead and pull our address 1. I'm just going to keep it simple here. And with formatting, so you can see the basic formatting tools up here. Here you can create bolded, you can do italicized, underline, you can do the normal, where you want it to be. Do you want it centered, to the right, to the left? You also can add in bullets or numerical. So say we wanted to add bullet. Oops. Whatever you want it to be. You can add bullets. You can add indentations. Some of the cool things, you also can do normal formatting. You can change to a few different font types. You can also increase the size, and you can change the color as well. So let's say we want this to be red font, and I'm highlighting now. I am changing some of the font of the dynamic values here as well. And then we had talked previously about hyperlinks. So this insert article, that's if you have knowledge articles you're using within CRM, you can insert a full article, but you also can insert hyperlinks. So let's go ahead and select hyperlink, the text you want the link to display, and then the URL of the link itself. So we're going to say view record in CRM. We're going to select the URL line. And on this list here, this dynamic values list, we are going to scroll down and we are looking for record URL. You can see it's the account record URL dynamic. We're going to click OK. And now we're going to have a hyperlink that says view record in CRM, and it has that link to the account. And I had mentioned that you can also add hyperlinks that are outside sources as well. So we're going to go ahead and do insert hyperlink as well. And we're going to say IS website because that is the link I have saved here, but it can be anything. I usually like to use weather.com, but today we're going to use our implementation specialist website. So I'm going to go ahead and select OK here. And we have our hyperlinks in. So I've created the body of the email. You will see down here it does default to show that the email is regarding this account because that is the entity that we had selected for the workflow. Most of the time, I do not use a lot of these other fields as far as duration, actual start or end, because the CRM is going to capture those when it sends the email. So you are not required to fill any of these out. So let's go ahead and we're going to save and close our email here. And I'm going to name my step here. Send email of new account. And another important thing that I would suggest for any workflow is always to add a stop workflow step within anything that you create. So I'm going to go ahead and add stop workflow. And it's just after it has sent that email, I want it to stop the workflow, stop using resources in the system. And as long as the message is sent, it's going to stop it with a status of succeeded. And right here where we see workflow job retention, I have it selected automatically delete completed workflow jobs to save disk space. And that's what it means is when this stops as succeeded, it's not going to keep it within the system. It's not going to take up any storage on the cloud. So we have our basic workflow set up here. So I'm going to go ahead and save it. And then it's really important, I'm going to go ahead and activate it. Once you activate a workflow, you cannot make changes to it unless you deactivate it. So here we can see this is now an activated workflow. We can view the properties of the email that we have set up, but we couldn't get in there if we type things in here. It just has a close. It doesn't have a save option. We can't make changes. You can't change your triggers or your scope or anything like that. You would have to deactivate it, and then you would be able to edit it. So we have this active. We're going to go ahead and go into an account so you can see what this would look like. And here's my one active account that I have. And now normally the workflow as we set it up, it triggers when an account is created, but for demo purposes, we're within the account and we're going to go to run workflow. And we can see we have that test email workflow. So I'm going to go ahead and add that here. And it's going to run that workflow. And it's just going to take a moment to run. And just give me one moment here to pull that up. And then we'll take a look at the email example here, and then we will be done, and I'll open it up for any questions that you guys have. Okay, new account has been created. So here we go. Here is our test email that we created. You can see it came to me in the to because I had set it up. I also am the account owner, so the CC came to me as well. This is our test email. It's pulled the data from that account. And if we click on this, we can view the record in the CRM and it takes us directly to that account record. And oh, I'm sorry, I almost forgot to show you guys the other hyperlink, IS website. This will take us to the IS website here. So you can see that it'll take us to outside websites as well. Does anybody have any questions? Wonderful. Well, I thank you for spending a little bit of your day with me. And if you do have any questions that come up afterwards, please feel free to reach out to me. Here's my contact information, and I would love hearing from you. Have a great rest of your day, everyone.